Obviously, the Bengals have a lot to play for because their playoff lives are at risk, but the Steelers also have a lot to look after because getting to play Houston as opposed to Buffalo in the first round is a much easier road. So, this is going to be very interesting. Pittsburgh will definitely be playing their starters. So, that makes it a lot easier to predict, and it's also going to make for a much better game, obviously. First off, for Cincinnati, they have the advantage at quarterback with Joe Burrow being a tier one bona fide stud, maybe the best quarterback in the league right now. And he's going against Russell Wilson, who is a tier two quarterback for me. When I say for me, I don't mean that it's just my opinion for these tiers. I mean that based on statistics, four advanced stats were used to cluster the performance of a quarterback. And from there, I tiered the quarterbacks. So Wilson is a tier two quarterback, which means he's still roughly top 10. And he is a very good quarterback this season. He's been on the downturn a little bit recently, but he is still playing at a high level overall. The next advantage for Cincy kind of correlates with Burrow, and by kind of, I mean it really does, in that Jamar Chase is great, and he's going against a below average corner in Joey Porter Jr. Chase is likely the best receiver this year. Nico Collins was playing like the best receiver in the league, but he got hurt, and Chase has just continually been excellent. He has been in that conversation with Nico Collins, and he's been in the lead without Nico Collins. Chase is going to eat up Joey Porter Jr., and that's going to be a massive advantage for them because you can't double Chase and Higgins. You just can't. That's too many resources to put on two guys, especially with the tight end, Mike Gesicki, being a competent tight end. I wouldn't say that he's great, but he's definitely competent. So there is definitely a difficulty in defending these two receivers for the Bengals, which leads us to our next point of T. Higgins being a star, and he's going against an awful Dante Jackson. Jackson has not worked out for Pittsburgh one bit. He has a ton of interceptions, but that's because every quarterback and their mom likes to target him. So he is getting a ton of balls thrown his way, and he catches a couple of them, but he is letting the receiver catch most of them. Shifting to the defense now for the Bengals, they have a stud pass rusher in Trey Hendrickson versus a good pass blocking Dan Moore. Moore, like Wilson, I wonder if they're related, are both on a little bit of a struggle recently. Moore has been going against good pass rushers, but he's also been playing somewhat poorly in his own right as well, which is making things a lot more difficult for Wilson. And that's going to be magnified by Trey Hendrickson, who is a fantastic pass rusher. He might just be the best defensive player in the league this year, which is hilarious to think that the Bengals are struggling to get into the playoffs and they have arguably the best quarterback, perhaps the best receiver, and then maybe the best edge rusher or defensive player in general this year. The next thing for the Bengals that I like is that they have a solid Mike Hilton versus a mid Calvin Austin. Austin is not bad. He's about average, but Hilton is above average. And Hilton is really at his best at defending the run, but he can cover pretty well as long as he doesn't have to go against great speed. The final advantage for the Bengals is that they have an average cornerback in Josh Newton versus a poor Mike Williams. This is an iffy advantage because Josh Newton is 4 inches shorter than Mike Williams is. So that could be problematic. Williams could moss Newton a fair bit. But talent wise, Newton appears to be the much better player, as Williams has not been good this year, and Newton is alright at least. As we shift to the Steelers' advantages, if you're enjoying this video, make sure you like and subscribe as I'll be pushing out more football content throughout the year. And with that out of the way, the advantage for the Steelers that we'll start off with is that the Steelers have a good run blocking unit versus an average Cincinnati run defense. As I mentioned before, Trey Hendrickson is great, and so too is BJ Hill. But then the other defensive linemen for the Bengals, including their depth pieces, are not very good at defending the run. So there are some gaps to attack for the Steelers, and they pretty universally have a good offensive line for run blocking. It's not the strongest for pass protection, and that is an issue oftentimes, but overall, they have a solid run blocking unit for sure. The next advantage for the Steelers is that George Pickens is a quality wide receiver versus a meh Cam Taylor Britt. Britt is, I would say, about dead average. His PFF grade would suggest that as well. But from my watching also, it seems like he can have good performances followed up by bad ones, really good ones by terrible ones, and then just sort of be in between against the more average receivers, which unfortunately for him and the Bengals, Pickens is not average. He's well above average. I would say about top 15. So he is more than likely going to have difficulty defending Pickens, and that can be something that the Steelers look to capitalize on. The next thing for the Steelers that I like is the final offensive advantage that they have, in that they have an above average Pat Freiermuth versus a mediocre in coverage Akeem Davis Gaither and a lacking Jermaine Pratt in coverage also. So there are some real weaknesses in the linebacker ranks for the Bengals. They are more run defending centric this season than they are pass coverage. So that is something that Freiermuth and even Darnell Washington, to an extent as well, will be able to have success with. And I think that's something the Steelers are going to look to attack because with Hilton having the advantage over Austin, they might look to get into 2 tight end sets a little bit more frequently than they otherwise would. Shifting to the defensive side now, they have the Steelers, that is. I think that would be kind of obvious if I didn't say it, but I said it anyways. They have the advantage over the Bengals in that Cincy has terrible run blocking and the Steelers have quality run defense. So the Bengals are going to be very one dimensional. They are not totally against that, I would imagine, because they are so good at passing, but still, they are going to be without an element of the game, which neutralizes a bit of the effectiveness of the offense. The next thing I like for the Steelers is that they have a gem, TJ Watt, versus a below average Amarius Mims. Mims has a sky high ceiling. His potential truly could be the best tackle in football someday, just because he has such great athletic abilities for his size, and he is a monster size, so take that for what you will. TJ Watt, though, I could see him giving Mims the business this week, because Mims is not very refined as a player yet. I think he's a little bit more refined than some people realized coming into the league, because they saw him as this ginormous unit of a man and thought that he's just a physical freak, but he had some technique to him. He is just not totally there yet, though. He's been able to just be the biggest, strongest, and one of the fastest linemen for a while now, and that's been his technique. But you need, obviously, all of that and technique to stand a chance in the NFL, which TJ Watt might be the best technician of an edge rusher. That isn't to say that he's the best edge rusher, because this year he definitely isn't, but he is still super, super talented and a menace to go against for basically any offensive lineman. The next advantage for the Steelers is their opposite side edge, Alex Highsmith, who is also great. He's going against a good pass blocking Orlando Brown, so there's less of a discrepancy between the talent of these players. But Highsmith is going to have the advantage nonetheless, because Highsmith is a top 10 or so edge rusher in the league, and Orlando Brown is an above average pass protector, but I wouldn't say he's much more than that. He can really absorb power very nicely, as he's 6'8" and like 350 pounds or so. I might be a little bit off on the weight. I would say give him a range of 15 pounds. I don't remember exactly, but I know that he is roughly 6'8". So he is a ginormous man, just like Mims. The Bengals have a type for sure. And Highsmith, he has speed to him as well, so that he can get around Brown effectively. He's not just going to rely on strength to push through Brown, which would not work because Brown is just not going to get pushed around. The next advantage for the Steelers is that they have a star defensive tackle in Cam Hayward. So basically, their entire defensive line so far has been mentioned, and there may or may not be one more player that gets mentioned as well. Hayward will need doubled all game because Alex Kappa is awful, and I feel harsh for saying that, but that's just the truth. Kappa is not a reliable pass protector whatsoever, and he's really struggled throughout his tenure in Cincinnati. I believe he started out with Tampa and he was good, but it's kind of been downhill from there. So Hayward is going to need double teamed. Watt might need double teamed. Highsmith, it would be good if you could get a double team on him. And then finally, Keanu Benton is a stud pass rusher that also needs doubled because Cody Ford is terrible. So that is a rough configuration for the line for the Bengals versus the Steelers. There are 4 defensive linemen that are going to be starting for the Steelers, and there are 4 defensive linemen that have advantageous matchups against the Bengals. That is terrifying. If the Steelers blitz at any point and get one-on-one matchups, the pressure is going to be instantaneous, and that's going to be hard to work with. The last advantage for either team is the final kind of cherry on top for the Steelers, and that they have home field advantage, which is a nice advantage because the Steeler fans are great and they really do pack a punch for opposing teams as much as you can for a home crowd. Home field advantage is thought to be worth about 2.5 points, so it's worth something. It's just not worth as much as some people might think. With all of this said, who do I lean towards? I think it's pretty obvious because the Bengals have 6 advantages and the Steelers have 9, which is nice. And with that said, I lean the Steelers. I think that they have the more complete team as they're much more balanced and not just strictly an offensive juggernaut. The Steelers are not an offensive juggernaut, I'll tell you that much. But they are a competent offense, sometimes more than that, in fact, as evident by them putting up like 40 something against the Bengals earlier this year in Cincinnati, nonetheless. So that is nice for the Steelers. And they have a great defense as well. Even if it's not maybe the highest tier, it's still great, or at least very good, I would say. With all of this said, thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you like and subscribe. And I will see you in the next video.